Welcome to the Agent State. This is episode 2. We're joined by David Minarsch, core contributor at OLAS, founding member of OLAS, and founder of Valory. David, thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm good. How are you?
Doing well, doing very well. So this is going to be a very special episode for us. Fed and I have both been following your project for a few years now, and it's really interesting to talk to you in this moment just because there is so much going on in the world of agents, and it feels like we've kind of hit a little lull in the world of crypto AI agents, but the rest of the world keeps storming on, and we know that's going to come back, but it's just such a unique moment. So thank you again for joining us. Fed, I know you have a lot of questions for David. I know we want to get into where we are right now. What does this moment look like? Fed, do you want to take it out?
Yeah. I think, David, most people already know you, but maybe a short intro could be nice to get some of the audience on the same page.
Sure. So I'm David. I co-founded Valory, which is a core contributor and Lux behind OLAS in 2021. My background is actually historically in maths and game theory. Did a PhD there, and that's probably the first time I came across this concept of agents, but in a much different context, or this sort of game theory context, economic context, agents as actors, in a game. And then I did some entrepreneurial things, some work in fintechs, on data science and machine learning. And then in 2019, I joined Fetch AI. They might be known to some of you, are probably one of the first, if not the first, crypto AI project, although back then that term wasn't used that much. And I built their agent framework for 2 years, and then left and co-founded OLAS, Valory, and co-created OLAS out of Valory. So that's been quite a journey. I've been building agents now for over 6 years, and a lot have changed, has changed. And really, I think the way I would sum it up today is that, back then it was obvious to us that giving software agents wallets is super exciting, and having those software agents have access to smart contracts to negotiate on chain or do other complex things like in DeFi, is a game changer. Back then we didn't have large language models that we know today. They were like in their infancy and not really useful. And so you had to build these very, very specialized agents. And obviously that's the other big thing which changed in the last few years. And when that happened, that was quite a big impact. So yeah, that's how I would summarize. My sort of journey so far on a very high level.
Yeah, and I'm sure we can go and talk for just an hour only about like your experience here. So we met, actually, the two of us met last year, I believe, at the Open AI in Berlin. By far the best conference I've been in crypto, and the best event probably crypto AI. Quite a bit of things changed since last year. We got from, I think we were at 3.5 GPT 3.5. I don't remember if we already have 4. And then now we have like a Claude 3.7, GPT 4.5, and I'd like to hear from you. Like, how do you feel like where are we today with the agent? So, what's the agent state? Not pun intended, but what's the agent state today, and what excites you what's happening new that you're looking forward to?
I mean, a lot is changing when you look at the underlying models. And like, I think for the listener, let's like kind of define some terminology a bit. Like when we say we want to build an agent, right? Like at the end of the day, we want to create like a software system that sort of takes inputs from various like digital like APIs, other forms of sources, sensors, and then takes that information, has some internal state, a goal, some memory, and then takes action. And that action can again be on like other APIs, something like maybe acting on something in the physical world. It's called actuators. So at the end of the day, that's what we mean by an agent. And then like there's so many different types of agents, right? Like you have like things which I would class more as agentic workflows, where you have an agent augment someone's like work or what they're doing. So things are like ChatGPT, where now it's quite agentic. Like if you go use O1, which is a model, or O3, they're all like specific models with like chain of thought, where they kind of reasoning about like the prompt you give them, right? Like they don't just spit out like an answer straight away. There's this whole tool use of models, which is sort of giving them these agentic features, and then still all these are used in a sort of augmentation context, right? You come with your prompt and you get an output maybe immediately or a few seconds later or half a minute later or whatever. Or with Open Operator, what it's called, OpenAI's operator, can be even longer. But then you have maybe further along the spectrum these more autonomous use cases where there's an agentic system that sort of runs even when you're not there. So rather than augmenting you in something you're doing, like in a workflow, like it will maybe kind of almost like replicate you or like duplicate you and like enable you to do more things whilst you do other things, right? So what comes to mind are some of the agents we have where they're trading agents. So they will trade on your behalf. And obviously you don't have to sit there and watch them. I mean, you can, but it's sort of not the point. And you can have an agent that maybe is an influence on your behalf or on behalf of a business you control or like a venture. So they are much more autonomous, right? They use certain sets of tools, like maybe posting to X or sending transaction to a blockchain, reading APIs to achieve that goal, which is like improving your portfolio balance or like improving your following, let's say, as an influencer. And so I think what we've seen is like that the models which go into these agents are getting better and more useful to build agentic systems. So the really big start was with like ChatGPT 3, because then like it suddenly became possible to give a model a prompt and actually get like really meaningful responses. And then people started noticing that you can kind of use the models to pick tools as well. And as these model architectures have now evolved, the models become smarter, i.e. they have more accurate knowledge. They occasionally, they hallucinate maybe less often, and their tool use gets better. And now with these reasoning models, they are themselves becoming agentic. So some things which previously you would have had to do in like a sort of ad hoc fashion around the model, you sort of start getting sort of with the model for free, right? Like not for free in the sense of it doesn't cost compute, but you don't have to build it.
Yeah, and so what's okay? A lot of questions comes to mind here. Hearing about where we went from the early model. Actually, you were here even before we had the LLM, the transformer model. So that must have been like crazy to see like this like generalized model that now you can ask pretty much anything. Yeah, they hallucinate, but they're almost like pretty much like a beginner AGI, like a baby AGI kind of thing. And the ARC, I'm sure you're familiar with François Chollet, and I think they're in Switzerland, if I remember well. So they just released the ARC 2.0 challenge because the first one was passed by GPT-03 Reasoner. They ran it for 48 hours or something, and it did 87%. So pretty much we passed the AGI model, the AGI test. And so now we push the ARC 2, and it feels like we're almost there with the AGI almost. But what problem do you see like in the models that you're using today and in the agent that you're running today? What are the problems and what you're solving, and what could you like to see improved to like get like to the next step? And so the next step, which in your case sounds like is the autonomous model that you just run and they will do trading for you. You don't have to watch them. Or you're saying we're already there and you already have this model running?
No. So today, the agents we have in OLAS are all systems that are made up of models of different types. Some of them large language models, some of them much smaller statistical models, smaller reinforcement learning models, and then various tools. And tools here being basically hard-coded logic that the model picks or some other part of the system picks to get stuff done. I think what would be sort of the holy grail is if you effectively have like some fully integrated architecture where rather than there having to be any rules-based systems, you have like everything sort of learned by the system, right? So you have like, I mean, it won't be a large language model, but it will be some sort of multimodal system which has the ability to do things with like maybe a set of tools, but otherwise natively do things the way reasoning models now sort of natively do things which previously would have to sort of build around like a large language model. I am firstly not the best person to say, how far are we to some definition of AGI or not. Like, I think like foundation model builders are the ones who one has to talk to, or base models. What I can say is that when we're building today, there's like certain constraints we run into. So for instance, for our agent that is a DeFi agent called Modius, which you can run in an app called Pearl, that's like a desktop app, you can download it, then the agent will be inside there, and you can fund it, and then it will start managing your funds. So this system, this agent is a system of things, of software tools, and it includes some models, some large language models. It also includes just a hard-coded set of rules. It includes some statistical models. And one shortcoming for instance, large language models right now is anything which is time series related. Like when you're trading, like it's a lot about time series, and these models are not built for that. So you can't like expect to have them perform well on some tasks which are in that domain. So what we then do is we take different models and combine them into a larger system. The way I like to think, or a different way to think about this, is like, how can you as a builder build agents? I think there's currently kind of two ways conceptually to go about it. Like, one is you put rules at the core, and then sort of models at the periphery, in the sense that you say, okay, well, here's maybe a loop which is hard-coded, or a finite state machine which defines the core sort of inner decision-making routine. And that might be like, okay, let me, like, just giving an example, like, let me check my wallet balance, then let me pick like a specific tool to determine what to do next with my funds, like whether to enter, exit a position, blah, blah, blah. So that's a very rules-based system. And then you could imagine you bolt on like some of those tools effectively like call models to make certain decisions, right? So whether to go left or right on that train track that is the finite state machine, conceptually. Another way to build an agent is to really have the model make every decision. So rather at the core, you basically say, okay, well, I have this model and like I feed it like context on where I'm at as the agent system, like, and then you feed it also context on like, okay, here are the tools you can actually select from, and then like you let the model decide what to do. These are two, I think, paradigms which are widely used right now to build agentic systems, and we're using both at OLAS. And so as models get better, I suspect that we'll get like almost entirely be building on the model side, where the model is in the driver's seat, and then it's just a question of like how do you create guardrails around that? Because the benefit of having like a set of rules at the core where the models are more like tools which the rules call into, then the benefit of that system is you're always like kind of looping around in like this kind of well-defined construct. Whereas if the model's in the driving seat, like, I mean, you might instruct a model or the system where the model sits at the core, you might instruct it to like, be like a DeFi agent that manages your wallet balance, but then how do you ensure that it doesn't drift and suddenly becomes like a social influencer that hands out like gifts to people on X, right? Like that could happen. Like if you poorly, like if your model is bad, or if there's like something in like the way in which the agent sort of evolves and sort of moves through time and the inputs it consumes, that it suddenly starts affecting its goal. So again, a lot of this sounds a bit abstract maybe now, the way I talk about it, but these are the sort of, I think, two ends of the spectrum right now you can be building in. And these more model integrated, like the more things kind of get subsumed into the model, the bigger becomes the question, how can you ensure that like whatever that model is doing is actually what it's sort of meant to be doing, right? Which is actually another point we could be discussing, which I think is like this whole distinction in agents as products versus like being more like beings, and because that is an interesting question which comes up with agents.
Yeah, so I think you hit on a lot of interesting stuff there. I think the question of as the models get better, they become more and more autonomous, right? And they take on kind of this, they can take on more context, more decision making. But so far, we've seen pretty narrow use cases, I would say, in terms of what the agents have been doing. So you mentioned DeFi as one kind of big space, and I think there's just so much there that hasn't really been hit on yet. But I think that's like one thing that we can all see, where it's just like, yeah, you could imagine using a DeFi agent for most of transactions that you do, whether it's just like you're taking a loan against certain positions, or you're managing certain positions, like what have you. Like that's not very far. You can imagine that. The other side of things where I think people really experimented was this idea of the agent being a being, right? And this is kind of what drove a lot of the hype in the last like crypto AI wave, where people would create these like beings, and really what they were doing is just posting on Twitter. But it was an interesting thing to see, where it was like, okay, what is this actually? And it as with everything in crypto, it got taken way too far and got crazy speculative bubble and all that, right? But you could see the beginnings of something that was interesting, and in typical crypto fashion, it just gets taken all the way. But I'm curious, like with all of that said, what kind of use cases interest you the most right now? Because it feels like we're at kind of like an in-between space where like the narrowly defined agents are here and they're doing stuff. Like I am a non-developer, non-technical, but like I use Cursor every day, and it's a godsend, right? Like the Cursor agent is one of the coolest things I've ever used. It like it just blows my mind from a technology user perspective. It's just incredible. But it's, it's, can't really argue that it's a being, not yet, I would say. But, maybe as the models keep getting better, like I'm talking to it in a way that maybe it's like, my friend or my coach or something like that. So it's an interesting space, but like, where do you see the more interesting use cases? And then as these models get better, like you said, like, do you see kind of like a merging of the two ways to go about building agents? I guess let's start there.
And can you please expand on that 1 second? Since David, you mentioned Perl and building agent on Perl. I've been looking into that because you guys, with OLAS, you have a grant for building the new agents there. So maybe even if you can touch specifically on Perl, what are some use cases that could be interesting for you to see?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm not very keen on having agents as beings just yet, like software agents, because there's a lot of problems that creates, right? Like if you're serious about it, I mean, if you're not, like, a lot of what happened recently in crypto, I think, was also a lot of smokes and mirrors, right? Like, okay, so people very quick to jump to calling something like a sentient software agent when really it's just like some dev somewhere running something and making decisions half the way. But the kind of idea is there now, and like the problem, I mean, I think people just need to be very careful with this, because if you think it through, right, like if an agent isn't a product, what does it mean? Well, you create it and then you give it some goal, and then it might decide to change its goal, right? And it might to actually counter whatever you intended it to do in the first place. It might go after you. Like, there's all sorts of ways. Could be good, could be bad, right? Like, you can clearly see in a world where we have fantastic software agents that are, fully independent from humans and do things out of their own accord, that we will also be at the same time in a world where some of them will be terrible and will do very bad things. And I don't think we're prepared for dealing with the consequences of that. I mean, there's also a lot of questions around a personal, then, like, like, will these things then start asking for, I don't know, like, social security number? Like, that's maybe the wrong example,
Well,
because like they don't need it. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I don't mean to cut you off, but like some guy was tweeting today. He was like, I'm trying to get Gemini to do something for me. And, Gemini's like, it's not even an agent, but he's trying to get it to do something. And he promised it $1,000. He's like, now it won't respond to me. It just keeps asking me for $1,000.
Right.
I mean, look.
Yeah, I mean, at the same time, like, because it's going to happen, and the question is, like, how to prepare, and like how to, because evolutionary pressure will, like, make sure that it will happen, right? Like, even if you don't want it to happen. But it's important to think about it. To be honest, I think most people actually want a product, because when you, even like the people who get excited about, like, an agent that has an attached coin or something, like, those people are ultimately excited because they hope that they will make some money. Let's face it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if the agent goes totally rogue or like just does nothing, or decides, like, okay, my best act is to turn myself off and call it a day, you could imagine any of endless scenarios. Like, that's not a very useful product. Like, hence you might find it a bit funny for some time, but like, I don't think it will have staying power. So the things which will have staying powers are products in the short and medium term. And products basically have to have some form of utility. Like, you need to be offering something, right? Like, be it things like entertainment, which some of those agents do, or good information, which others of those do, right? Like, maybe they source information more effectively for you, like an XBT claims to do. maybe they give you signal on something. Obviously, the immediate question with a lot of these things then is, okay, well, who, like, are you the product? Is it your product? Right? Like the same thing, like you're using like social networks. It's like, well, is it my product? Am I the product? Because and that's where we come to what we're doing at OLAS. It's all about sovereignty around yourself and your agent. So in crypto, right, like the people who were there originally and the space was created because, or like got this attention, and like all these builders actually creating things out of nothing because of like one key concept in a way, which is like this, not your keys, not your coins, which kind of embeds a lot of like the things we care about, like decentralization, self-sovereignty over our wallets, like the way we do our business, our finance, and so on, our digital identities. And like with AI, a similar question emerges, right? Like with closed AI, I might have a very useful product, but who guarantees me that it's there tomorrow? Who guarantees me that the thing I'm being told I'm interacting with is what I'm interacting with? Who allows me to have like economic participation? Maybe I figure out a way to be very economically, like a very useful way of using the model, which the model creator now wants to monopolize. Okay, they take it away from me. So that's why people are interested in open source AI, right? Some of the reasons. Also for privacy reasons. Like every time you upload like one of those funny pictures to make the, turn into Ghibli style or whatever, like that's now a picture OpenAI has. And maybe the terms of service are, like whatever, promising they don't use it, but do you believe it? And then we haven't even touched on advertising, right? Like I think Ilya from there was the first time where I kind of came across this. He pitched it in one of his decks, and it kind of caught on for me. It's like, okay, we see advertising with search, right? It's an obvious monetization. That's actually how Google makes most of their money. And obviously, there's a question like when and how do you introduce advertising into things like ChatGPT, right? Like you have all these users querying this thing, like eventually there will be no risk. Like once the monetization arc comes of this like technology arc, right? Like you do need to recoup your billions and billions of infrastructure investment, then like advertising will come in. And so for all these reasons, it's desirable to, and many more probably, to own your weights, because then you can own your AI in the sense, like the weights of the model. And so like you kind of have these two things. So you put them together. Now you have an agent needs a useful agent needs weights, needs a model, and a useful agent needs keys because it needs funds. And the easiest way for an agent to have like funds isn't with a bank account, which is like super complicated and long-winded route. It's with like a crypto wallet, which takes no time. Anyone can spin it up and programmatically fund it. And so like your agents, if it's meant to be really powerful and if it's meant to be a product that serves you only, then it better be satisfying both, right? You have the keys and you have the weights. And that's sort of what drives how we build Pearl and like how we building OLAS more generally. So Pearl being this app, agent app store for OLAS agents and beyond. But what drives that is like ownership of your agent rather than sort of renting your agent on some hosted platform, which has use cases and will never go away. But like our value proposition is own the keys and own the weights and own the whole agent system, right, locally. And recently we then launched this accelerator program, which has seen a tremendous amount of attention. So we had over 30 applications so far. It's still rolling in, and we have currently 10 slots for this, although we might expand the slots. And we've, I think, selected so far 6 or so teams. They're all on the OLAS account. All the way, we can cover some use cases in a second, but basically, anyone who's listening here is building exciting agents, like do look at the accelerator. It's at olas.network/accelerator. And I'm very excited about it because if we're currently with 3 agents in Perl. If we add another 10, like this really turns into like a real nice app store. And for me, it's all about this utility you can drive to users. And so now let's talk a little bit about some of the use cases. So right now we have 3 agents in there. One is a prediction market agent, so it takes your funds and invests them in prediction markets with the objective of gains. The second one is an agent that takes your funds and invests them in DeFi opportunities. And the third one is an agent that you give a persona, and it then effectively kind of develops that as an influencer. So it uses like text, video, and image to create like a following on X. With the accelerator, we now have a couple of teams confirmed. So one of them is Bio Protocol. They're building a DeSci agent. So once that's in there, you'll have an agent in there that will basically contribute to a larger research objective on your behalf, and sort of you get rewarded for that contribution. There's a Giza protocol, which some of you might have heard of it. They're doing also great autonomous AI agent work for DeFi, so they're also bringing that to Perl. We have various other actually DeFi use cases. I think that's still the most obvious one, and I'll come back to why I think it's so important as well. But yeah, we would be very keen. I recently posted a thread on like some agent use cases, which I'd be very keen to see. I think there's some stuff around social. I always was dreaming of like the situation where every one of us, like all humans, have like an agent that effectively meets all the other agents on our behalf and figures out like who should we be talking to, because you and I mean, we only have so much time, right? Like, so realistically, never gonna talk to 6 billion, let alone a small fraction thereof, or 8 or however many we are now. But agents could do that, right? And they could downsample it and be like, okay, here's like the 100 you really should be talking to this year, and like building a relationship with, and kind of make those introductions. That'd be a very cool use case. And that kind of use case, I don't want to outsource that agent to like some centralized party. There's also things around health, like, it seems obvious, and I think it's only a like regulatory like lack that we don't have yet much AI in the health space, even though it's increasing. And I'm sure like doctors and all of them will kind of augment their workflows further. And at the other end of the spectrum, there's like personal health advisory, right, and coaches and all this kind of stuff. I see a lot of areas there where like apps that users can fully own rather than sort of rent or a big value proposition.
Yeah. So I think this idea of an app store, like a decentralized agent app store, is super interesting. And I want to get deeper into what specific use cases OLAS enables. But I think at this point, it'd be really interesting to hear kind of the founding story of OLAS. If you can spend a couple of minutes there, because you said something which is very interesting, which is, you get to own your keys, which is the core part of crypto, but then also owning your weights. And I think that it's clear to us who are in this space that, your money can get taken anytime, your information can get taken anytime. But it's maybe not obvious to everybody, and especially for those who are listening who don't have that much knowledge on what OLAS does. It would be really, really interesting to hear kind of what led you to that conclusion at the start, because at that time I think this is really not on anybody's mind. So I think that'd be a really interesting story to hear.
So as I said, started at FetchAI building agents in 2019, and then the key insight was just like using agents with wallets unlocks like interesting opportunities. The problem we though had was always the capabilities of the models were too low, so we didn't manage to build the most exciting agents at the time. And when I left one of the reasons I wanted to, with my co-founder start Valory, and then out of this OLAS, was that we saw an opportunity to basically couple agents with the concept of DAOs. So we saw that there's like all these DAOs and they have like all these processes, but actually most of them were done by like individuals in those DAOs, and they were done in a highly centralized way. So someone would have to do something like sign some transactions or run some off-chain system and so on. And if these people went away, then the system, the whole DAO wouldn't function the way it was meant to be. And that seemed odd. And so at the time, at the beginning, we were very focused on this idea of helping you decentralize your off-chain processes with agents. And we actually built this thing where you could basically take a set of processes that would define the agent, and then you could run that agent itself as a distributed network. So rather than the agent being like one node somewhere, it was like a set of nodes that communicated with each other and sort of replicated their state, and then would sign transactions and send them on chain. And that we called that decentralized off-chain service. It's quite a mouthful, and it actually, like, we had a lot of interest for it, and a lot of DAOs were very like good DAOs, like Balancer, Ceramic, whereas others wanted to CrowdSwap, wanted to build with us at the time, but it never like really took off because there was a reason why these DAOs were like this. It's just like the operational parts of the DAO were always the last thing they worried about. All of them were still trying to grow, right? And so like anything that involved like decentralizing the off-chain processes and making that more decentralized wasn't really actually top of mind. And so in early 2023, we had this bit of a midlife crisis for OLAS because we had built all this off-chain infrastructure. We had launched our white paper, and we were sort of ramping up to publicly like have the token trade publicly, but we didn't really hit something where we felt comfortable like it was going somewhere like at scale. And then what happened in late 2022 was like ChatGPT, and then like in early 2023 we were building the first like ChatGPT enabled agents, like basically agents that would use like large language model under the hood to make some of decisions. And one agent we built was called Governator, and what it would do is like it was built on the same architecture, like multiple nodes, and they would all like use a different instance of ChatGPT, and then they would kind of come in an agreement how to vote on like DAO proposals. And so we just built that in ETH Denver 2023 as like a hackathon concept. And sort of it really got a lot of attention. Like a lot of people got very excited about it because it married like this kind of concept of decentralized off-chain services with this idea of these kind of new type of AI agents that have these large language models inside. And then we're like, okay, well, this is cool, but like still we know that this one like we can build these services like for DAOs or as DAOs, but like there's a limit to that. Like we don't feel comfortable that this is growing. It's like, can we build effectively user-owned agents? Because what we found again and again was like, well, what was stopping us from growing? It's like coordination problem. We had to coordinate a whole bunch of people in a DAO, but every one of them was super excited. But them as a group, they it went slow. So it's like, okay, if we can give every one of them like their own agent to do something, that's like an unlock. And that's sort of then where it came from, and that's how we like kind of started over time leaning more and more into this sort of full-on user ownership of the agent, rather than like this like more complex co-ownership, which we still believe in and which is still part of our mission, but like we think it's, I guess, sort of further step. Like you first need to get users to own their own agent before you can worry about like agents as like groups kind of doing things on behalf of a group of humans, because it's just more coordination effort. And so that's one way to describe our journey. And like, I mean, there's obviously loads of other elements to it.
Yeah, super interesting. And how would you describe? So it's so crazy here how the LLM, especially, you know, with ChatGPT coming out, it kind of redefined how we could, you know, use this stuff in such a way. Like it really made it so many consumer applications could, you know, just be built where even that one layer of abstraction where, you know, instead of typing text, you have to type code, or you have to type, you know, click 3 buttons on a wallet, like just that thing, it enables so much. So maybe if you could talk about a little bit about like where OLAS is now, where the ecosystem is now. It sounds like there's a lot going on with, you know, with the accelerator, with agents being built on top, with a lot of focus on actual utility, actual projects that can do things for people. And you know, the use cases you hit on are things that you're really never going to use a closed model for, right? Like you're never going to give OpenAI your wallet, or you're never going to give, you know, like that's just not going to happen. So it's very interesting to think about like what kind of use cases could, you know, be available in the future. But, you know, maybe we can start with current day, you know, where the ecosystem is at, and then, you know, go from there.
Yeah, so we do actually use OpenAI and other models, but we never give them the wallet. So
Well,
we'll
that's
come back
what
to
I mean.
that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
I got your point. Just wanted to make that clear. And
I appreciate it.
last, like, maybe just to continue from where I left off and kind of answer your question in that go. So when we then in 2023 launched publicly everything, it was in multiple stages. Later that year, this OpenAI scandal happened, where there was this whole board issue, and Sam Altman was fired for some time, and then he came back and so on. And that weekend or week or whenever that happened, like that, there was only a few crypto AI projects around at the time. Like there was the old guard, like where I used to work at Fetcher, and there was like BitTensor and us, and that's pretty much it. Like we suddenly got a lot of attention, and that was because I think people realized, okay, like if I don't, like there's this important new AI stuff, and like there's these models, and I'm using them, and like maybe someone will just decide for me not to use them. So people became like apparent to the concepts we discussed earlier, that like you better like control your weights, basically. And obviously most of us today still aren't, but more than then. And it really drove attention towards us. So we had like some crazy amount of attention in late 2023, early 2024. And the project was much younger at the time than, I guess, like the attention, like, right, like people were transferring a lot of the sort of excitement they had about OpenAI straight onto us, who were like teeny relative to them. And so we, throughout all 2024, basically build out a lot of like the protocol, and the protocol was always there, but like a lot of the accessibility around the protocol, like there were all sorts of mechanisms that were there but hard to access for people. We also had this new staking mechanism which we brought, which really targeted on bootstrapping agentic use cases, because as I said before, it's always about coordinating people, right? And like the staking mechanism helped us like coordinate people more around these use cases we were building. So throughout 2024, we like really focused on putting a lot of more meat around the existing protocol and bringing more use cases. And what we found was that initially we didn't have Pearl. So initially we were very developer focused going into 2024. So like you could, you know, everything was open source, you could build your agent, blah, blah, blah. But the reality is most users are consumers. They don't want to build an agent, they want to just use it. And we didn't really have much to answer to that. And so then in May, we launched Pearl last year, but in like a very alpha version and with just one agent inside. And it took us for the rest of the year to really like polish it and make it better. And then early this year, we launched it as this agent app store. And that journey is still ongoing. It's a product which ultimately runs on the end user's device. Every end user's device is heterogeneous. Like there's like local weirdness around like things they have installed or not installed and things that crash and you need to help them. And then you have 3 different major platforms we support, like Linux, Windows, and Mac. And then within Mac, you have 2 different, like the old Intel and the new Mac Silicon. And then like you need to build the binaries for those and so on. It's like all the technical stuff. It's not that complicated, but it just takes effort. You have to have the team members to do it. You have all the UI UX issues, like because you're not just dealing with the agent has to be good, the wallet has to be good, the onboarding has to be good. We use a lot of Safe under the hood, like the Safe multi-sig, which helps us a lot. But then again, like you have to integrate all of this well and so on. So it's just a lot of groundwork had to happen, which we did last year. And whilst we were doing all this, then like this meta came along with like, agent coins, where it's more like agents as a service, actually, exactly what we had abandoned. But agents as a service in a very centralized way, right? Like everything we saw late last year and early this year, like these agents, I think it's exciting because it has brought attention. But there is, apart from the tokens themselves, which sometimes have proper like decentralization, sometimes have terrible decentralization, maybe sometimes even minted admin keys or whatever. But like apart from the coins themselves, there's no decentralization, right? The agent runs on a Web2 platform, someone hosts it, and you have no access to it, and they can shut it down, and it might break and whatever. You might not even have access to the code. In some cases you do, in some cases you don't. And so it's interesting because it makes sense in hindsight, right? Like the centralized, easy route is always the one which kind of breaks through first. And that's what ultimately happened. We as a project, as OLAS, weren't as prepared for that meta, I would say, and we suffered from attention as a result. But now that this, I think, first wave is over, people are like, okay, like that's been all cool, but like let's actually have like useful stuff, right? And that kind of puts us back in the spotlight, and that's what we're very excited about, because ultimately, I have to tell you, I think like one big problem crypto has is that there is a lot of good builders, and then there's a lot of not so good builders, right? And like we really just need to build good applications. Like at the end of the day, it's no good to keep talking about it. It needs to happen. And like we have all the tools. There's exciting models now which we can leverage, be it open source or closed. There's really a lot to be built. And like for me, just coming to the core use case and then branching out again, like for me, one of the key things with crypto is like, people keep talking about how it sucks because we have to connect to all these chains and all these wallets and all this stuff. And I agree with you, but that's step 2. That's step 2 of why it sucks. Step 1 of why it sucks is because it's very, very complicated to understand. Like conceptually, the things you need to know to engage with it is mind-boggling. And I got drawn into it because I was like this technical geek. And then I was like, okay, cool. This is all exciting. But then when I'm actually talking to users, I realize like they don't get it. And they never want to get it. Like if you really want to onboard everyone to crypto rails, you can't give them a MetaMask wallet. That's one step too far. Like they need to have that abstracted. They don't want to know exactly what a lending protocol is and how it functions, and that therefore they can have a yield there. Like they just want to say, okay, here's some funds, like make something safe happen with them, like, and give me some good yield, right? Like that's sort of what people do when they go to the bank. They don't read the small print and try to figure out how an investment fund works with, like, let's say, whatever it's bundling, right? And so I think like that's where the huge opportunity is with agents and crypto, because the crypto rails are there, and then like you put the agent on top to get rid of all this complexity, and you take the agent to pick the user up where they are. So some user is super informed about all these things and can express that, and might say when they're talking to the agent, okay, look, like I'm like happy for this to be these and these blue chip protocols with these and these mechanisms, but please avoid this protocol because I've read something bad about them and like whatever. Your other user comes and just says, here's $1,000. do something safe with this, right? And like maybe the agent comes back and say, what do you mean with safe? And you say, well, nothing crazy, like my risk profile is that of a granny or whatever. And then that's good, right? Like that's how they express themselves. And I think that's what I'm excited about. And that's why with Pearl, it's like really focused on selecting fantastic builders. Because we at OLAS, like, we want to build cool stuff. We have built some cool stuff. There's still a lot of cool stuff to be built. And we want to work with like really, really good builders to bring like super exciting applications to end users.
Awesome. And yeah, digesting all of these and 100% agree on the current state and 100% agree also on the problems. Yeah, crypto definitely is like the onboarding in crypto is like lagging because MetaMask is difficult, but now we have also all this fragmentation between chains, and it's like it's super hard for regular users to like get MetaMask, put liquidity, move liquidity around, sign all the transactions, and it's something that even as a crypto user, I hate doing. I don't want to do that, and I'm looking forward for an agent to do that. And so we're, I think I mentioned it before. So we're building the FAI agent in Flow, and one of the problems that we're having, which probably will resonate with you as well, is like the wallet. So one question is like, do the user own the wallet and the agent have access to the wallet? Like using something like ERC 7715, where the user give like access to like $1,000 a month, for example? Or does the user need to have a smart wallet where the agent now can come back with an ABI to run like a transaction, like the one you mentioned before, find me the best yield, and my risk profile is 1%, something like that. The problem that we're having with that is, how do you execute that transaction in a way that is like, you don't have to sign with MetaMask every single step? And I'd be curious if you, in the projects that you're seeing, you saw some solution there. Because in our case, we kick the can 3 months from now, because it looks like there's also ERC 7683, I think, or I forgot one. The one that the multi-chain consortium that is like to make cross-chain transaction easier. So, but it all these sounds like right now more like research and a good initiative, but until there's something effective, something like that we can use, I feel like especially we're bootstrap, we don't have a token, so it's not like something that we can do in the next 2 years and start talking about now. But for this kind of company, do you see any solutions today, or you think will be?
So I mean, we have one of those principles at Valory. We have for anyone who wants to apply for Valory, which by the way, we have lots of roles open. We have one of the values, which is get simple and done, which is always kind of with us, because like, I agree with you, there's all sorts of like delegation or like transaction guarding approaches to dealing with this problem. The way we've solved it for the time being, and our technical team is open to and observing like what we might do in the future, but for now we just simply have smart accounts, a lot of smart accounts. So when you download Pearl, effectively, when the first thing you do when you onboard is like you're setting up like a backup, like you're defining a backup wallet on your master wallet. So your master wallet itself is a smart account, a safe account, which has 2 signers. It's the backup wallet, which hopefully you have like very securely stored somewhere, and it's the local signing key that's on device. And then from that, we have a set of nested safes, one for each agent. So when you then like click around and you're like, oh, I want to run this agent, effectively what happens under the hood is that a new safe gets created for that agent, where that agent itself has its own signing key on that safe, and the other signing key is the master wallet. And that kind of nested structure allows like recovery, because you can recover everything back with the backup wallet because of the way it's nested. And then the agents only have access to those funds that sit in those specific wallets, but they fully control them. So now in the future, I'm sure we'll run into use cases where even on the agent level, you might want to have further guards. Maybe like you fund it with the agent wallet with, let's say, 10K, and then you at any given time only want the agent to maybe move 1,000 or whatever. The beautiful thing is that Safe has this transaction guard system which you can layer on top. So we intend on using that in the future. We have actually some MVPs where we are using it, but the main Pearl app currently just uses the segregation via the different smart accounts, and it works fine so far.
Awesome. So we already have that solution now for delegating, like finding the best yield and go cross chain, basically.
Yeah, and that's then the use case. So in the Modius agent, which is the DeFi agent, the current version is like constrained to the Mod chain, but it's built in a totally cross-chain compatible way. So what we are launching, and this is sort of not announced, but yeah, I mean, kind of obvious if you follow her account, is that we are working towards making that multi-chain, so that the Modius agent, which itself belongs to the baby Degen family, as we call them. There's also Optimus and a couple of others which will be there. They will ultimately all be cross-chain, and that's how obviously it should be. Currently, the one in Pearl isn't yet.
Gotcha. Okay, yeah, I'll love the alpha, because that was one of our problem where we were like tried so many different solutions, and at the last eDenver, I talked with a bunch of people in the AI plus crypto space, and yeah, the problem of the intents and how do you delegate and who owns the wallet is a DAO where each agent have access, each agent have their own wallet, and that's the kind of like
so the
question.
DAO point, just double dipping on that. That sort of takes us back to what I was saying earlier. And we actually, when we were starting and doing these decentralized off-chain services, there would be this agent which ultimately ends up looking a bit like a DAO. And we then, we're based in Switzerland. We try to understand our like users, legal ramification when using our products and our own when building these products. So we had this whole like audit done from a legal point of view, like how these systems work. And the problem anytime you operate a service is, right, like it's fundamentally different than if the user owns the product. So if you think about MetaMask, like there's no like central MetaMask company that is running the wallet for you, right? Like you're downloading an open source software client which has a bunch of like permissive like terms attached, and that's it. If you are running your Pearl agent, similar, like you're downloading open source software, you're in control and you have responsibility. If you run, let's say, a decentralized off-chain system or a centralized off-chain system that acts as a service on behalf of a user group, like you need to be very careful what you're doing for obvious reasons. Like if you're pooling user funds, you might suddenly be like a regulated entity, right? Like you need to be very careful what kind of setup you have here. And that's why we have like totally stepped away from any of these kind of pooled user fund stuff, because unless you do this fully on-chain with smart contracts and really know what you're doing, it's just a can of worms. And it's much, much easier to just say, okay, well, the user has an agent that is effectively a super smart wallet, and they fully custody it, because then it's pretty clear, like it's self-custody, and yes, the wallet is smarter, but that's sort of what you're dealing with.
Right. And I still need to talk with my legal team about even the agent. I'm sure you already have this conversation before. So if the agent runs the transaction, well, the agent is OpenAI. The LLM is just like a wrapper on top of OpenAI, but you still write the system prompt, and you still run the centralized agent in your platform. So I'd be curious, like, you do delegate the transaction, but you still are, you're not a money transmitter in that sense, but you still have some kind
we
of
are
like
not. We are not, because we are not running anything on behalf of the user. The user runs it on their device with Perl. So we are just a provider of open source software. But you're correct. The moment where you centralize this, let's say you have some hosted backend and you're suddenly running 1,000 agents there and they're all like DeFi agent, like, yeah, you definitely should talk to your lawyer because
Yes.
that has a lot of implications on a lot of things.
Yeah. We're still not running that side, and hopefully we'll build on Perl or other decentralized solutions where we don't have to even think about all that legal. Cool. Just to move to a different type of question. I'd be curious from you to know, like, if there's any research papers or projects or related to crypto, ERC, anything that capture your attention that you think could be interesting to share for anyone in the AI Web3 space?
So off the top of my head, I'm always very bad with these things, but we are actually launching our own little podcast. No, much shorter. It's like max 15 minutes a week, and it will contain like a kind of walkthrough of what happened in AI in that week. That will be one source I recommend. So keep following the OLAS account for the announcement around this. And then I think one thing I'm currently very much looking into with the team is the Anthropic announced a while ago MCP. Have you heard of this? It's the Model Context Protocol, and we we have a marketplace for agents where agents already programmatically interact with each other, where that is very relevant. So I'm quite interested about this. I'm also following the various like high level. I mean, there's only so many hours in the day, but high level, like what's happening with these reasoning models and trying to understand how they work better. And then like there's this AI prolific AI educator and researcher, Kapati. I always wonder if I pronounce it wrongly. But basically he has, you Google it and you'll find it. And he has this large language model explainer series. I mean, I'm not sure if it's a series.
Yeah.
It's like a YouTube thing about large language models, and there's different versions I've seen. I've watched a longer one. It's very, I highly recommend. I mean, if you as a user, like he's great, he's a great educator, and so you can watch this at any level, really, and you get something out of it.
Yeah. I watched the learning LLM. I still need to watch the GPT-2, building GPT-2. And I totally recommend it as well. It's like either you're a beginner or you're like already understand LLM. There's always something to capture there, and especially when he talks about how the pre-training works, the training works, and it goes into the embedding models. That's amazing. And you might find actually this interesting. So we run in New York. I organize this event called AI NYC. It's like a community of researchers, engineers, and founders from the hyperscalers. So we have people from OpenAI, Anthropic, IBM, Brain, Watson, then Google, AWS, people from Grok. It's pretty solid. And we had 2 episodes. One was on MCP with a bunch of people running a demo. And something I didn't know about MCP, Anthropic just hired 300 people to work on MCP. So they're pushing really hard on the marketing side, which the problem in crypto is similar to the problem in AI, which is like the attention is all you need paper is not just related to transformer, is related also to keeping the attention on projects so that they can get funding. And small parenthesis, part of the reason why all these new LLM comes up with the best ELO is because they need to get attention and they get trained on the result of the benchmarks. So don't trust everything you see on Twitter, of course. But I mean, I'm sure you're already familiar
But
with
I can't trust Twitter. My life got destroyed.
Yes. Yeah, and so we had these two episodes. One was on MCP and the other one was on reasoning models. And we had one expert from IBM, the research in IBM for LLMs, and he's an expert in reasoner models. Before reasoner models were like a DeepSeek R1 and O1 before we're integrated in the actual like LLM. And yeah, so we went down the rabbit hole and super interesting. So yeah, and this month we have another episode, another event on the 23rd. So if you're in New York anytime, let us know, and you should swing by because
I will do May. Let's
May.
pin that
Okay,
down.
awesome.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yep.
Yeah, I
We
mean,
didn't plan
nice. I
for
love
May yet.
this.
yeah.
Okay, we've got maybe 5 more minutes here. We can maybe get into the fun stuff now. So, I mean, we're all watching what's happening, you know, in the world at large. I forget which one of you mentioned Ghibli at the beginning of this episode, but yeah, right. I think Sam Altman tweeted that they're adding like 1 million new users every day, or for the first few days after that. Again, I don't know if you should believe everything on Twitter, but it has been a breakthrough of some sorts in the consumer world. So I'm curious, like, you know, we start off this conversation with like the models getting better and better and better creates like this new level of autonomy, and it just creates this whole new world of use cases, which on the flip side creates a whole new world of danger. But let's start with the positive. Like, what is the thing, like maybe the singular thing that either keeps you up at night in an exciting way? Like, what if you were to, you know, rewind 15 years, 10 years in your career, what would you want to be building now? Where are the things out there that are catching your eye the most?
I didn't quite catch the last. Where are the things?
I think, Karan, your connection is a bit bumpy. So so he's basically was asking what excites you the most right now. What's project wise, and then on the flip side, what's your PDOM basically?
Right. I don't have a number for that, but I do think it's very important to, like, we seem like quite at an inflection point with technology, with AI, but also like geopolitically. I think a key learning for me and from how I understand like history and like economics is that we as humanity tend to do particularly well when there's a lot of competition and effectively like decentralization, like competitive markets, like all good thing. And occasionally, you know, you need regulation to bring them about. But we tend to be very poorly historically when there's high degrees of centralization, be it around a ruler or like a nation state, or when, you know, now potentially with like technology, right? And so when I'm saying like our mission is like to bring user-owned AI, I mean, it's like I mentioned a bunch of things why that's important, like on an individual level, but I think societal, it's super, super important. Like everyone will be augmented by AI, and in many places also replicated in the sense that like you know, in a positive sense potentially, where you kind of just can do more work because like there's a bunch of AI agents working alongside you, and ultimately robots as well. And like if that ends up being highly centralized, where there's a few providers who control all this economically, that's a really, really big problem, because then all the way, like all our global economy works the way in which we compete for better products, for resources, and where that competition leads to better products, that will be put in question, right? And just because you have like some super intelligent AI, if there's no competitive element, I'm not sure we'll get to better versions of that for like humanity or really anything. So that's why I'm like focused on user-owned AI, because it means also business-owned AI, like the idea that like businesses can build like full stack things without having to like siphon off like a large share of their profits to like some provider of a LLM or whatever the next iteration of useful AI models is. On the positive side, like we're in a funny space where really you can build such fantastic things today, but everyone talks about them, but not actually that many have been built. Like, you see, like we mentioned Cursor before, and like coding agents, they're getting pretty good now, and they're pretty useful for the sort of scoped work with good guidance, right? You can get a lot out of them. Let's have similar agents, for so many aspects of life. And like, I think for any serious builder out there, like just lock in and build it. I think what happens a lot now is like people build half of it or like a fourth of it, and then they give up. And because it's this attention thing, like it's like a brain rot. Like everyone just gets constantly like distracted, and as a result, like we have enormous amounts of models now. Like every day there's like some model announcements, but like actually like products, not that many. Like even if you think about like, okay, what you just referenced with ChatGPT, like they're onboarding people because of the images. Well, that's kind of cool, but like it'd be even cooler if this would actually be like a super useful product now. It's a sort of useful product. I use it for like a lot of things in my work, and I really don't want to minimize it, but there's so much more it can be, right? And like I think we can build such better products with these tools. Even if progress was to stop on the tools themselves and the models, we could build very fantastic products now. Let's do that.
I love it. Fed, you got anything else before we wrap up here?
No, I think that was perfect to wrap up. So I'll let you do the closing.
Amazing. Yeah, this is a fantastic conversation. I'm a lot more bullish on crypto as the rails for AI than I have been in a long time. It's easy to get disillusioned when the only thing that's getting attention is Fartcoin, So thank you very much, David, for joining us. This is a fantastic episode. Where can people follow you, follow your work, and find out more about what you guys are doing?
Yeah, you can obviously visit the site OLAS.network for the project, and then to follow the OLAS account, it's actually still Autonolas, which is our old name, at Autonolas. And then if it's also on the website linked. And then if you want to follow me, I'm David_ENIM on X, and that's it.
Cool. And you have an accelerator going, right? People can follow that.
Yeah. So there's two, like if you're like want to build agents for end users and like you have like an exciting value proposition there, like look at olas.network/accelerator. There's a whole program outline, and there's like grants up to 100K per project. You can qualify for at different milestones, and then we have a agent-to-agent marketplace. We didn't talk about it too much, but really the flip side of users owning their agents is agents being able to do everything with a crypto wallet, right? Agents being able to programmatically tap into any resource they want with micropayments and a crypto wallet. And that's what our marketplace enables. And so if you have like an agent as a service that could be programmatically accessed by other agents, then we have that marketplace where you can register today. So that's also now a site.
Amazing.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
This has been
This was a blast.
episode.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is fantastic. Cool. Well, thank you so much. This was episode 2 of The Agent State. We'll be back.